Welcome. I'm Reena Aggarwal, Robert E. McDonough Professor of Finance and Director of the Georgetown University Center for Financial Markets and Policy. In celebration of Women's History Month, the center has organized a number of events. Today, we are delighted to continue our Women Leaders in Finance and Business series. Two of our students, Priscilla Mensah, an MBA student in the McDonough School of Business, and Morgan Saylor, an undergraduate in the School of Foreign Service, will interview today's leader. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Suzanne Donohoe, a member of Georgetown University's Board of Directors. Ms. Donohoe is a partner and global head of strategic growth at KKR. In this role, she's responsible for building new businesses for the firm and growing KKR's strategic investor partnerships that involves some of the largest global institutions in the world. Under her leadership, she and her team have raised over $225 billion from a global client base. She serves on the firm's Investment Management and Distribution Committee. Ms. Donohoe was the first woman partner at KKR. Prior to joining KKR, she was a partner and head of Goldman Sachs Asset Management International. She has been recognized by Barron's amongst the 100 most influential women in US finance. I should also point out, Suzanne is co-chair of Georgetown University's Wall Street Alliance. This is one of the largest endowed scholarship pools that Georgetown has to assist students with financial aid. Suzanne, we are most grateful to you for your leadership on this important initiative and also your contributions to Georgetown in so many different ways. Suzanne holds a BA from Georgetown University and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania. Suzanne, we are honored to have you speak today in the Center for Financial Markets and Policy's Women Leaders in Finance and Business series. Now, I'm going to hand it over to our students, Priscilla and Morgan.
Ms. Donohoe, it's an honor to meet you during Women's History Month. Thanks for your commitment to Georgetown. A bit about myself. I grew up in Ghana in West Africa. Prior to Georgetown, I was a senior structural engineer in the infrastructure space. My interest in infrastructure finance drove my desire to go back to business school. I'm having a great experience and happy to share that I will take a summer internship in investment banking. At Georgetown, at the initiative of the Center for Financial Markets and Policy, I've been serving as a project manager alongside 3 undergrads on a white paper on SPACs, which I've really enjoyed. I will now turn it over to Morgan to introduce herself and kick us off with the first question.
Excellent. Sure, and first off, thank you, Priscilla, and thank you, Ms. Donohoe, for being here today. It's truly such a pleasure to meet you. As for my background, my name is Morgan Saylor, and I'm in my 3rd year here at Georgetown in the School of Foreign Service. I am the Vice President of the undergraduate branch of Georgetown FinTech. I'm an entrepreneurship fellow, and I'm also a member of the Georgetown University sailing team. And thanks to Professor Aggarwal, I've been so fortunate to get involved with the Center for Financial Markets and Policy this semester, especially in their initiative to link the undergraduate students with the center and to put on events like this one. So with that being said, Ms. Donohoe, we can shift to you. So could you start by telling us a little bit more about your career path after you graduated from Georgetown?
I would be really happy to, Morgan. It's a pleasure to speak with you, and Priscilla and Reena, thank you so much for that incredibly gracious introduction. I've already decided we should be recruiting Morgan and Priscilla just from their descriptions of what they're doing. So it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to meet you all and spend time on this talk. My career path since leaving Georgetown has actually been pretty simple. I graduated from the college in 1992 and actually was a government major and history and English minors. So although I think we were technically only allowed one minor. So I think my minor might have been history, but I'm not sure I remember at this point. But I really thought during my time at Georgetown that I'd probably go to law school and become a lawyer. And in fact, I even took the LSAT in my senior year, and that I was sort of planning in that way. And then I can remember my dad asked a very important question, which was, "Hey, Suzanne, how do you plan to pay for law school?" Minor detail, I hadn't been so focused on that as I should have been. And I thought, oh, I guess I better start interviewing at some of these firms that come to campus. And lo and behold, several financial firms came, and I ended up at Goldman Sachs. And I spent the first 16 and a half years of my career at Goldman. But really, when I went, what attracted me to it was I went to what was supposed to be a 2-year investment banking program. And I thought, oh, I'll go get some work experience, maybe make some money, and then I'll go to law school. And so I guess my first message to everybody would be to say, it's great to have an idea, but the reality is once you get out into the work world, be flexible, because those ideas may change. And for me, what I found was that I just was enjoying so much what I was doing during that initial time at Goldman, that when it came time to think about leaving at the end of a second year, I was finding that I valued the idea of staying for a third and then staying on further. Somewhere along the way, I figured out that business school might be more relevant for me than law school. So I actually did the executive program at Wharton rather than leaving Goldman, because I felt like I was in a great job and I just would value some more formalized training. And then after that 16 and a half year window at Goldman, where I did a variety of different things, I had the opportunity to go to KKR, which is a leading private markets alternative investment firm. And I've been with KKR for about the last 12 years. And so basically I've worked in 2 places. They've both been in the heart of finance. But as I said, I don't think I ever really expected that that's where I'd end up as I grew up as a child. I will say that there's some value to getting real world experiences. And I think that you guys are much more attuned to this today. And in some ways it's a good thing, some ways maybe a bad thing, probably creates earlier pressure on students than I was accustomed to. But often it's typical that people have internships or they have some work experience during their time in college. And I actually think that can be very informative. And I think probably one of the things that opened my eyes to the idea of finance was that I worked at a mutual fund company in the summers in college. And I think it just created the idea that this was very accessible. So despite the fact that my formal training at Georgetown, or my formal education at Georgetown, tended to the liberal arts, I took a few econ classes, which I actually really liked, and always felt pretty comfortable with math and numbers, but it just really hadn't been my emphasis while at Georgetown. And yet, there was something about trying my hand at finance that struck me as interesting. So anyway, that's a little bit long-winded, but basically worked in 2 places, found that when you arrive at a place and it's working for you and you're enjoying the work you're doing and valuing your colleagues and feeling like you're contributing, that was all the impetus I needed to stay. And it's been a great ride, is what I would say.
Great, thanks for sharing that. We'll now switch a little bit, and in the interest of Women's History Month, we want to know, so you've had obviously an amazing career. So we're curious to know what, on the other hand, you think are the deterrents for women entering finance, given that you've had a great experience?
It's a great question, Priscilla. And one of the things I do in some of my spare time at KKR is co-lead our Inclusion and Diversity Council. And so I find that I spend a decent amount of time thinking about why our candidate pools are sometimes less diverse than we would like, or why we're not the natural attraction point for many folks. And I think a huge piece of that is lack of role models. And if you think about why that is, I think it has everything to do with many aspects of finance, having grown up as more of apprenticeship models, where people might have been hiring in smaller numbers, and the tendency that sometimes happens where people hire in their image. So, you know, if you've got a small organization, which for instance, many investment firms are, particularly in their early stage, maybe they hire, you know, 1 or 2 people a year. And so the tendency is to hire people that they think are like them or are comfortable, and they're not as conscious about that exercise. And so I honestly think that's the biggest deterrent, because when I look at the core skills that it takes to be successful in finance, there's no reason to think that women don't possess them in equal measure as men, and some might argue they have even more of those skills. So I think it really has everything to do with just history and not a lot to do with who can be successful, or who might enjoy it and have impact.
Yeah, that's really great insight. And, you know, I think you're an example of one of those women that has kind of broken the glass ceiling, being named first woman partner at KKR. So can you tell us a little bit about what the significance of that was?
Sure. You know, I think I was very fortunate. I've been very fortunate at various stages of my career, but during my time at Goldman Sachs, I had opportunities to work with some fabulous people who invested in me. And I think because of that investment, and hopefully they felt that there was good reciprocity in that I, you know, contributed back, I think I got opportunities early in my time at Goldman. I think part of that was also that I took on an assignment. I moved from a very established part of Goldman Sachs within investment banking to what was at the time a very young asset management business. And it was not really well understood in the firm. And I can remember many people saying, why would you do that? Like, why would you move from a market leading business to this business that at the time wasn't regarded as top of field? But I think I did it in that case because I had developed a relationship with the people running that business, and I trusted that I was going to learn a lot working closely with them. And so at any rate, it meant that during my time at Goldman, I think earlier than maybe some others, I had the opportunity to be in leadership roles and to enjoy senior title and all of those things. So then when I moved to KKR 12 years ago or so, in fact, the title was appropriate for the experiences that I'd had and for the job I was being asked to do. Importantly, though, KKR at that time culturally didn't hire people in as partners. So you might join the firm as a managing director, for instance, and then presuming that people felt there was a good cultural fit, then if appropriate, you might have the opportunity to become a partner. So that's in fact how that happened at KKR. And I was very gratified by that decision. It showed early trust in me in a new firm. And even more important though than any of that is that I can't off the top of my head count how many women partners we have at KKR now. We have quite a number. And even more important than that is that we have a pipeline of people that I believe will become partners. And so much, much more important than what happened several years ago is that we've created a culture that is one where people, I think of all types, believe they can succeed and achieve the leadership levels in the firm and have an awful lot to offer to the organization. And, every day we're sort of challenging ourselves to make sure that we are finding ways to support all of our professionals at various stages of their lives, and to ensure that we get the maximum, I'll call it, impact from the hiring and training decisions that we make. And hopefully we end up married to the vast majority of the people that we hire, and they build very long careers at the firm.
Thank you. That was great. And my next question, I think you touched a little bit on it. So you are co-chair of the Inclusion and Diversity Council at KKR. Can you tell us about your work on the council?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's really a team that works on this topic, and the great news is that I think our firm, maybe before many firms of our type, so I'll call them large alternative managers, our firm got focused on this subject because we recognized that if we had a very open and inclusive culture, we were more likely to deliver great results. And that it's really as simple as that. And those results could be in terms of the investment performance that we deliver to our clients, just much more likely to see opportunities and avoid pitfalls if we have a really comprehensive view of a situation, and also better able to engage with a lot of our stakeholders, whether those stakeholders are the people who entrust their capital to us, or could be our shareholders or many others in the communities that we operate in. So it's a team that works on this. As we've gotten more serious about the effort, we also have staffed it with folks whose job it is full-time. So I do it more part-time, if you will. But it's a privilege to be doing it in a place where the leadership of our firm is deeply committed to this idea, and where we recognize the landscape shifting all the time, and the items that we need to be thoughtful or sensitive about have evolved as people have gotten more comfortable to talk about what's important to them. And so I find it's an interesting space to spend time on, because you learn new things kind of with every engagement.
Thank you. So the next question is, why do you think women should consider a career in finance? And then a follow-up to that, what career advice do you have for Georgetown students as they navigate internships and full-time recruitment?
Ooh, we could spend a long time on this. Well, first of all, I think you should all think about careers in finance. It's an extremely dynamic industry, and one that attracts smart people, that's always changing, that really helps drive major decisions in the world. So, if you think about wanting to have impact in how you engage in the world and how you manage your career over time, the reality is there are lots of ways that people in finance have impact, and that they can take their energy and make it a force for good. And I think sometimes people don't think that way about finance. They think of it as all about money, but they're not necessarily thinking about the impact that capital can have on communities, on businesses, on people, on change. And so I look at it and say, with the benefit of 28 years of hindsight, if you're attracted to a fast-paced environment where people are thoughtful and smart, where actually lots of business gets done on the power of your word. So it's actually ethics and conducting yourself in a way that is within the bounds of what people expect. That's a big part of what powers Wall Street and powers financial markets. And I think people also don't always understand that. Yes, there's a contract that may follow later, but there's an awful lot that gets done based on people's formation of relationships and establishing trust. And you want to do all of that in a way that can help drive positive change. I think that finance offers that. So, you know, I do think people, women in particular, but all people should consider a career in finance. My advice, appreciating that, as I mentioned before, I think you ladies have it tougher than was the case when I was going through undergrad or grad school, because in some ways people expect you to have your ideas more well-formed while you're still in formation, you know, while you're still in school. I wouldn't be intimidated by that though, because on the one hand, they might expect you to have done some homework, but they also know that part of what will happen is you'll experience the world and you'll change your mind or you'll evolve your thinking, and that's okay. And so I guess my advice in the juggling area, because I think that's at the heart of the question, is it is a good test drive for later in your career, perhaps when you're trying to balance maybe the demands of career and of things outside of work that you value, whether that's work on nonprofits or it's family commitments or friendships or whatever it might be. You know, try to pick things you derive joy from. So, you know, I know you won't always know that at the start of an internship. Is this fun or is this not very fun? But, and you know, you look for the positive things you can in each of those experiences, but where possible, do things you enjoy. Because I think you've got a much better shot at excelling at the things that you enjoy. You'll just be more engaged and devote more of your heart to that. So I don't know, those are some quick thoughts. We could talk more about that one though, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. My last question, and I think you've answered a lot of it already, is what would you what do you think you would have liked to know when you were in our position, and therefore skills that you would advise that we build whilst we're in this position?
Well, one thing I've learned from some of the interactions I've had at Georgetown, and some of the leadership at Georgetown, is that they frequently receive feedback back about the quality of the students that come from Georgetown and come into finance, as an example, but also other businesses, and the management and leadership qualities that often those students end up exhibiting through their career. So I think it's good for you guys to know that whatever type of student Georgetown is attracted to, I think it's on average probably a pretty well-rounded, globally minded, thoughtful person who is maybe attracted to Georgetown in part because of the idea of serving others. That type of mentality ends up also being a pretty effective one, I think, to help rise through different challenges in the workplace and potentially be a leader in that context. So have faith, know your skills, and your all the things you're learning will serve you well, and enjoy. That's what I would say.
And just to wrap things up, our very last thing, you just sort of answered this question, but as we celebrate Women's History Month and we're talking about hope and the future of women in finance, what is it that gives you the most hope?
Oh, I think that the world is actually so focused on it now. I mean, when I started in finance, I don't think Women's History Month existed. Nobody talked about diversity. You know, if you happen to have women or people of color in that workplace, it was inadvertent. It wasn't well thought out, if you will. It was just what happened in the hiring process. And I think with so much more consciousness today of the value of a more diverse organization, it gives me great hope about the things that that women, for instance, can achieve, and the sort of virtuous circle of role models and good examples that are to come. So that's what I think of.
Awesome. So I will wrap things up. On behalf of Georgetown University and the Center for Financial Markets and Policy, we would like to thank you for joining us today to learn from your perspective and experiences as a woman leader in business. It's been a great pleasure to speak with you.
Well, likewise, it's really been an honor. So thank you all for inviting me.
Yeah, let me add my thank you and again for speaking with us today, but also for everything that you do for Georgetown and have been doing over decades now. So, but thank you so much. This is extremely beneficial to our students.